My boyfriend warned, "Change your attitude or we're done." It came out of nowhere, sharp and cold. After I questioned him about his weekend plans, I replied, "I choose done." And with that, everything between us shattered. I packed his things into 3 suitcases and 4 boxes, every last item he'd left at my place. The clothes, shoes, the watch he'd gotten for his birthday, his designer bags. I loaded them into my car, grabbed the address from the tracker app he didn't know I'd installed on our shared tablet, and drove to his apartment. It had been building up for months, his attitude changing when I started asking simple questions. Friday nights, he'd disappear into the night, and I could never get a straight answer. He'd wear clothes I hadn't seen before, smell of cologne that wasn't his, then claim it was just a night with the guys. But his attitude, his defensiveness, spoke volumes. When I asked, "Where are you going tonight?" the sharp retort came instantly, "Why are you keeping tabs on me?" That's when I knew. Tonight I was done. I stood outside his building, bags in hand, waiting for him to answer his phone. When he did, the words came easy. "I'm downstairs at your place. Got your stuff. Want to come get it, or should I leave it with the doorman?" The silence that followed was thick. Then came the callous response. "What are you talking about?" I let the words hang in the air before I dropped them. "Apartment 304. That's where I am. Your car's in the lot. Saw it when I pulled in." The realization hit him just as I hung up. I could hear the hesitation in his breath as he finally came rushing downstairs. When he arrived, I handed him his things. He didn't say much, just stood there, mouth open, eyes wide with disbelief. "You can't just do this," he said. But I had, and I was done. I met him 3 years ago. I was 26, fresh out of a string of bad relationships, and determined to find someone who didn't come with emotional baggage. At first, he seemed perfect. He was charming, funny, and incredibly attentive. We clicked right away, our conversations flowing like we'd known each other for years. He had this way of making me feel special, like no one else mattered when we were together. We were inseparable for the first few months. He treated me like I was the most important person in his life, and I adored the way he made me feel. I wasn't used to being treated like this. Loved, adored, cherished. And for the first time in a long time, I thought I had found the one. We moved in together after a year of dating. I knew it was fast, but it felt right. He was always there when I needed him, always making time for me, despite his busy schedule. He had a good job in finance, making decent money, and I worked as a marketing coordinator. Our financial situation was balanced. We split everything evenly, and I was content with how things were going. The future seemed bright, and for once I felt secure. We talked about marriage. I wasn't in any rush, but it seemed like something that was in our future. He even dropped hints about rings, asking me what kind of one I'd want. He told me that he'd always dreamed of a small, intimate wedding with just a few close friends and family. He wanted to make sure everything was perfect when the time came, and I loved that about him. But then something changed about 3 months ago. It wasn't obvious at first, but there were signs, little things I brushed off because I wanted to believe in him, in us. The first thing I noticed was his late-night work calls. He'd spend hours in front of his laptop, always working when he thought I was asleep. But when I asked him about it, he'd just shrug it off, saying, "It's just a client thing. Don't worry about it." Then, there were the late nights out. He started going out more often, sometimes for work, sometimes with friends. I didn't think much of it at first, but as the weeks passed, the nights became more frequent, and the stories more vague. I tried to trust him, but the more I asked, the more defensive he became. It was a slow build-up, a shift in his tone, in his words, in his actions. I told myself it was nothing. He was just busy, stressed out. But deep down, I started feeling something was off. It wasn't like before. The affection, the constant attention, the reassurance I'd gotten used to. It wasn't there anymore, and I couldn't ignore the nagging feeling in the back of my mind. At first, I tried to keep the peace. I didn't want to be the jealous girlfriend, questioning every move he made. But as the weeks went on, I found myself doing just that. His behavior wasn't adding up, and I couldn't turn a blind eye to it anymore. I had to know where he was. I had to know what he was doing. The signs were there from the start. Little things I dismissed because I didn't want to overthink or come across as paranoid. But the first crack in our relationship came when he began acting different around his friends. He'd always been social, but now, when I was around, his behavior changed. He'd laugh a little too loudly, joke a little too much, and when I asked him about his plans for the weekend, he'd brush it off as if I were overreacting. I started to question it more. I didn't want to, but I had no choice. Every time I'd ask a simple question, his response was more defensive. "Why are you always questioning me?" he'd snap, rolling his eyes as if I were being unreasonable. And then there was the issue with his phone. It was subtle at first, but one night I was walking past him as he was scrolling through his messages, and I caught a glimpse of a text conversation with his coworker. She was asking about some late-night work plans, and while it wasn't out of the ordinary at first, something about it rubbed me the wrong way. He quickly put his phone down and changed the subject, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I decided to let it go, not wanting to seem like I was constantly overthinking things. But as the days went on, the vague responses about his whereabouts kept coming. Friday night turned into Saturday night, and before I knew it, I was sitting alone on the couch in our apartment while he worked late again. I noticed the way he started dressing differently too. More care put into his appearance, new clothes I didn't recognize, and the smell of a new cologne that didn't belong to him. I tried not to let it bother me. Maybe it was just his way of wanting to feel good about himself, I thought. But deep down, the questions kept building. Why was he suddenly so secretive? Why was I feeling like I was being kept in the dark? And then, one evening, I found the first real clue. I was cleaning around the apartment, picking up a few things, when I came across a receipt from a store I didn't recognize. It was for a gift, a designer watch, one I knew he didn't need. But the strangest part was the name on the receipt. It was addressed to a woman, his coworker, the one he'd been talking about in his late-night texts. I felt my heart drop. This was it. This was the first real confirmation of my doubts. The woman he kept telling me was just a friend, had somehow gotten a designer watch. It didn't make sense. And it certainly didn't add up with the man I had thought I was in a relationship with. I tried to confront him about it the next day. He was evasive, shrugging it off as a misunderstanding. "It's not what you think," he insisted. "She's just a colleague, and the gift was for a work anniversary, nothing more." But the way he said it, the look in his eyes, it felt like a lie. And that was when I realized how deep the hole went. The lies were no longer subtle. They were right in front of me, and I had been ignoring them for far too long. The tension continued to build in the weeks that followed. I started tracking his location, just to see if my suspicions were right. Every Friday night, he went to the same place, the same apartment, the same address. I couldn't deny it anymore. He was spending his weekends with her. But I was in too deep. We had built a life together, and as much as I wanted to confront him, I didn't want to admit to myself that I might be losing him. That's when I made the decision to ask him about it. One evening, as he was getting ready to leave again, I asked, "Where are you going tonight?" And when his response was as defensive as ever, I realized something crucial. I was no longer the person he wanted to come home to. His anger flared, his words cutting into me as he yelled, "You're always questioning me. You don't trust me anymore." And that's when I saw it. He was the one who had changed, not me. It all came crashing down that night. I had finally reached my breaking point. The emotional exhaustion of trying to understand his lies, the gaslighting, and the constant questioning of my own instincts had taken its toll. I wasn't the same person I had been when we first met. The girl who trusted, who gave her heart freely, was now replaced with someone far more cautious, far more suspicious. It was another Friday night. He had been quiet all evening, only half engaged, his mind clearly elsewhere. I was sitting on the couch, scrolling through my phone, pretending to be absorbed in whatever was on the screen. But I wasn't. I was watching him. Watching the way he kept his distance, how he was so careful with his words, how every time I asked him a question, his response was short, defensive, and cold. This wasn't the man I had fallen for. This wasn't the man who had once made me feel like I was the most important person in the world. As he got ready to leave, I asked him once again, "Where are you going tonight?" I had hoped for honesty. I had hoped for him to say something simple like, "Out with the guys," or "Just grabbing a drink with a colleague." Instead, he snapped back, his face twisting with frustration. "You know, I'm tired of this. Why are you always keeping tabs on me? You've been acting like this for weeks. I can't even go out without you interrogating me." The anger in his voice hit me harder than it should have. This wasn't just a small argument. This was something deeper. Something that had been building for a long time. His words stung, but I didn't flinch. I had to stay strong. "I'm just asking where you're going," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's not a crime to ask where my boyfriend is going, right?" It's not about where I'm going, he said, stepping closer to me, his expression growing darker. It's about you not trusting me anymore. You're suffocating me. He was angry. He was defensive. And for the first time, I realized that this wasn't a simple misunderstanding. This wasn't a moment of frustration that would pass. This was the culmination of months of lies, secrecy, and emotional manipulation. Do you know what I'm sick of? I asked him, my voice barely above a whisper. I'm sick of being treated like I'm crazy for asking simple questions. I'm sick of this attitude, and I'm sick of feeling like I don't even know who you are anymore. He froze. There it was, the words that had been building in my mind for weeks. I wasn't going to take it anymore. I wasn't going to live in this relationship where my questions were met with defensiveness and anger. I wasn't going to keep pretending everything was fine when it clearly wasn't. You've been acting strange for weeks, I continued, the words coming faster now. The late nights, the new clothes, the hiding your phone. It's obvious, and I'm done pretending I don't see it. I could see the shift in his expression. His eyes narrowed, his jaw tightened. You're accusing me of something? He asked, the anger rising in his voice again. No, I'm not accusing you, I replied, my voice steady now. But I can't ignore the truth any longer. You've been lying to me, and I've had enough. He looked at me for a long moment, his eyes searching mine. But there was no apology, no regret, only frustration. You don't understand, he said, his voice quiet now, almost pleading. You're blowing this out of proportion. I just needed space. I didn't want to hurt you. Space? I echoed, incredulous. You've been spending every weekend with her, your coworker, the one who just happens to be a friend. Don't tell me you needed space. You've been with her the whole time. His face turned pale. He didn't respond. He didn't have to. The truth was already out. That's it, isn't it? I said, my voice barely above a whisper. You're with her, and you've been lying to me about it. The silence stretched between us. I could feel the weight of it, the heaviness of the words that had just been spoken. And then he said it. I didn't want to hurt you, he repeated, his voice shaking now. But I've been seeing her for weeks. I couldn't be honest with you about it. I stared at him, the realization sinking in. Everything that had been going on, all the lies, all the secrecy, it had all been for nothing. There was no saving this. Not now. I was done. I choose done, I said again. The words final, like a sentence I had been waiting to deliver. We're done. I stood there for a moment, watching him process what I had just said. His expression shifted from anger to disbelief, then to something more desperate, regret, maybe. But there was no apology, not a single word of remorse, only confusion. You can't be serious, he said, his voice trembling slightly. He was looking at me as though I were a stranger, as though he couldn't comprehend why I was doing this, why I was walking away. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. The truth was out, and I wasn't going to stand there and beg him to explain himself. He had made his choice long before I had, and now I was making mine. I'm serious, I finally said, my voice firm. You don't get to lie to me, to treat me like I'm crazy for questioning you, and expect me to just stay here pretending everything is fine. I won't do it. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He just stood there, looking at me like he was waiting for me to change my mind. But I didn't change my mind. I had made it clear. We were done. I'm not coming back, I said, my voice shaking with anger now, but also relief. We're done. It's over. He took a step toward me, his hand outstretched as though he wanted to touch me, to somehow undo what had just happened. But I stepped back, out of his reach. I thought you trusted me, he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. I thought we were supposed to be a team. We were, I said, shaking my head, but you made it clear we weren't. You've been hiding things from me, and you've been lying to my face. You don't get to play the victim now. His face reddened, and for a moment I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. But then I remembered everything. His behavior, the lies, the gaslighting, and I knew I couldn't go back. I don't want to hear it, I said. You've had your chance. We're done. I'm done. He stared at me for a long time, his eyes wide, his jaw clenched. But then he seemed to deflate, as if all the fight had gone out of him. He turned away, walking to the door without another word. I didn't watch him leave. I couldn't. I had made my decision, and this time there was no turning back. After the door slammed behind him, I stood there for a long time, just breathing. The silence in the apartment was deafening, but it was also peaceful. For the first time in months, I could hear my own thoughts without the constant noise of his lies and excuses drowning them out. It felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders, and I realized how much I had been holding on to, how much I had been pretending to ignore. His lies, his secrecy, his arrogance, none of it had ever been worth it. I had been so afraid of losing him, of losing the life we had built, but now that it was over, I felt freer than I had in a long time. I reached for my phone, my hands shaking slightly as I dialed a number I hadn't called in months. I needed to talk to someone, anyone, and I needed to hear someone else's voice that wasn't tainted by his lies. When my best friend picked up, I didn't even say hello. I just let out a long breath. "I did it," I said, my voice cracking a little. "It's over. We're done." There was a long pause on the other end of the line before she spoke. "I knew you would be, eventually," she said gently. "I'm proud of you." I exhaled, my eyes stinging with the tears I hadn't allowed myself to cry before. I don't know why it took me so long. I saw the signs. I knew something was wrong, but I kept making excuses for him. "You can't change what happened," she said softly. "You can only change what happens next, and right now, you're doing the right thing." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. It felt good to hear someone else say it. It felt good to finally say the words out loud, to admit that I had made the right choice. "I'm done," I repeated, the words settling in my chest like a weight finally lifted. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe again. The silence in the apartment after he left was deafening, but strangely, it was a relief. For the first time in weeks, I didn't have to question where he was or who he was with. For the first time, I didn't have to feel like I was walking on eggshells, wondering if he'd come home late and avoid answering my questions. It felt like the weight of the world had been lifted from my shoulders. But that didn't mean the aftermath was easy. The text started immediately. At first, it was from a number I didn't recognize, a message that read, "We need to talk. You're overreacting. It's not what you think." I didn't respond. I couldn't bring myself to. But the messages kept coming. New number after new number, each one sounding more frantic than the last. It felt like he thought he could wear me down, that I would eventually cave in and listen to his side of the story. But I wasn't that girl anymore. I had already heard enough. I blocked the numbers, one by one. The next day, his best friend showed up at my door. He didn't even ring the bell, just barged in with a look of desperation on his face. "You need to hear him out," he said, his voice low but urgent. "He's devastated. He never wanted it to end like this." I looked at him for a long moment. I had no patience for this. No patience for people who were still willing to defend someone who had lied to me for months. "Devastated?" I echoed. "You're telling me that he's devastated while he's been staying at another woman's place every weekend for 3 months? No, I'm done being the one to give him excuses." "He made a mistake," his best friend said, looking uncomfortable. "Everyone makes mistakes. Please, just hear him out. You're throwing away 3 years over a misunderstanding." I shook my head, my voice growing firmer. "This isn't a misunderstanding. It's a pattern. He's been lying to me for months, and I caught him. I'm not throwing away anything. He's the one who threw it away when he chose to spend his weekends at someone else's apartment." His best friend didn't know what to say. He just stood there, looking at me like I was the villain in this story. He didn't get it. He couldn't see the truth because he was still blinded by loyalty. "You don't understand," he started again, but I was done listening. I turned, walking toward the door. "No, I understand perfectly. He wasn't honest with me, and I won't stick around for more of this. You can tell him that." His best friend didn't try to stop me. He just stood there, his shoulders slumped in defeat. I didn't feel guilty. I wasn't going to apologize for standing up for myself. As I closed the door behind him, my phone rang again. I glanced at the screen. This time, it was my ex's mom. I sighed, rubbed my forehead, and answered. "You need to fix this with my son," she said, her voice sharp, as though I were the one who had done something wrong. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "No, I don't. He made his choices, and now he has to deal with the consequences." "He's suffering," his mom's voice cracked as she raised it, clearly distraught. "He's devastated. He's not handling this well." I wasn't moved. "That's not my problem anymore," I said flatly. "He's the one who lied and betrayed my trust. He's the one who's been spending every weekend at another woman's apartment while we were living together. He chose this. He can deal with it." "You're being cruel," she cried. "You're throwing away something good over jealousy." I laughed bitterly. "Jealousy? This isn't jealousy. This is self-respect. He lied to me. He manipulated me, and I'm done with it." "You'll regret this," her mom said, her voice trembling with emotion. "He loves you. This isn't like him." "Clearly it is," I said, cutting her off. "He's been doing this for months, and now he wants to play the victim. But I'm not going to buy into his lies anymore. I'm done." Her silence was deafening, but I didn't wait for a reply. I hung up the phone, feeling resolute. There was no more room for excuses, no more justifications. This wasn't about love or loyalty anymore. It was about respect, and he had lost mine long ago. But the harassment didn't stop there. Later that week, I got a message from his coworker, the woman I had suspected all along. "Hey, I think there's been a misunderstanding. He's really upset. He's just staying at my place because you two were fighting." I stared at the message for a moment before responding. We weren't fighting until he started lying about where he was every weekend. If you're going to continue lying for him, that's on you, but don't expect me to believe it anymore. Her response was quick, defensive. "He's just crashing at my place. Nothing happened. He needed space." "Space?" I echoed, incredulous. "You're saying he needed space and chose to spend it at your apartment every weekend?" There was a long silence before she replied. "It's complicated." I smiled bitterly, feeling the final pieces of the puzzle fall into place. Not complicated anymore. He's single, you're single, problem solved. I blocked her. I was done. I spent the rest of the week in silence. No more texts, no more calls, no more excuses. I felt the peace I hadn't realized I was missing. There were no more lies to decode, no more wondering if I was being crazy, no more feeling like I was walking on eggshells. I had my life back, and for the first time in months, it felt like I could breathe again. The silence after I blocked his coworker was suffocating, but it wasn't enough to drown out the constant barrage of messages, calls, and voicemails. They came in waves, each one more frantic than the last. I could feel my resolve beginning to crack with each notification, but I refused to cave. I had made my decision, and I wasn't about to let anyone change my mind. Not him, not his family, not anyone. But there was something about the way his texts felt, something in the pleading tone that started to gnaw at me. "Please, we need to talk. I made a mistake. It wasn't what you think." I read the words over and over, trying to steady myself. But the truth was, I had heard it all before. Excuses, justifications, apologies. Every time he made promises that he didn't keep, and every time I forgave him. And where did that get me? Here, alone. Broken. It was a reminder of all the times I had let him get away with things, of all the times I had ignored my gut, thinking I was being unreasonable, of the countless nights I had spent lying awake, wondering why he wasn't coming home or why he was acting distant. I had allowed myself to get lost in the hope that things would get better, that he would come to his senses. But he never did. And now, here I was. The weight of everything, the lies, the manipulation, the guilt trips, crashing down on me all at once. I wasn't just heartbroken. I was angry. I was furious at myself for letting it go on for so long. I had trusted him. I had believed in us, in our future, and for what? To be lied to be made a fool of. I couldn't hold back the tears anymore. They came in torrents, but they weren't tears of sadness. No, they were tears of frustration. Tears of finally letting go of everything I had been holding on to. Every time I had ignored a red flag, every time I had excused his behavior, it was all flooding back, and I couldn't stop it. I was done being the one who cared more, done being the one who held it all together while he waltzed through life with no consequences. But as much as I wanted to cry, to give in to the weight of everything, there was a voice inside of me, stronger now than ever before, that told me I couldn't. I couldn't fall apart now. I had made it this far, and I wasn't going to let him or anyone else take that from me. I wiped my eyes and turned off my phone, locking it away in the drawer. I didn't want to hear from him anymore. I didn't want to hear from anyone. The noise, the guilt, the pressure, it had to stop. It was too much. I needed peace. And if that meant cutting off everything and everyone who was still holding on to the past, then so be it. But no matter how hard I tried to push it all out of my mind, it kept creeping back. Every time the phone buzzed with a new message, or every time I heard a voice on the other end of the line, the darkness in my mind grew heavier. And then came the visit. His mother showed up at my door again, this time with his sister. They both had the same look on their faces, the same look they always wore when they were trying to manipulate me into feeling guilty. "You need to fix this," his mom said, her voice shaky but firm. "This isn't like you. You've always been so strong, but this is different. You can't just walk away from 3 years. He loves you. He's hurting. He needs you." I stared at her, the words hitting me harder than I wanted to admit. Of course he was hurting. Of course he was devastated. But he didn't deserve my sympathy. Not after everything he had done. He had made his choice, and now he had to deal with it. I crossed my arms, trying to keep my voice steady. He hurt me, over and over again. And you want me to go back and fix it? To pretend like nothing happened? He didn't mean for any of this to happen, his sister chimed in, stepping forward. He just needs a little time to figure things out. Time? He had all the time in the world. Time to lie, time to cheat, time to betray me. But where was my time? Where was the respect I deserved? I don't care about his timing anymore, I said, my voice rising. I'm not his backup plan. I'm not his second choice, and I'm certainly not his safety net while he figures things out. I've spent enough time waiting for him to change. He's not going to. Not now. Not ever. They stood there, stunned, as I opened the door and motioned for them to leave. I didn't want to hear any more of their excuses. I didn't want to hear how I should be the one to fix everything. I'm done, I said, standing tall. This is over, and you need to accept that. For a moment, they didn't move, but then his mother turned and walked away, his sister following her reluctantly. I closed the door behind them, my heart pounding in my chest. I felt a rush of relief, but it was followed by a sinking feeling in my stomach. There was a part of me that still felt guilty. Guilty for walking away, guilty for choosing myself. But the other part of me knew it was the only choice I had. I had tried to be the woman he wanted, the woman who would put up with his mistakes, his lies, his excuses, but not anymore. I wasn't going to sacrifice my happiness just to keep him from feeling bad about his choices. The darkness in my mind wasn't going away anytime soon, but for the first time in months, I felt like I could finally start moving forward. I had spent weeks in a constant battle with myself, torn between my loyalty to a man who had clearly never been loyal to me, and the part of me that knew the truth. The truth that I had been lying to myself for far too long, ignoring my own instincts, my gut feelings. But when I saw his latest message, the one where he tried to convince me that everything he did was for us, I couldn't ignore it anymore. The truth was out, and so was the lie. He'd been seeing her all along. I wasn't shocked anymore. The anger I had felt when I first confronted him had started to fade, replaced by something far stronger: disappointment. I had spent so much time trying to make excuses for him, trying to believe the best in him, that I had forgotten about me. I had forgotten what it felt like to trust myself. As much as I had tried to hold on to what we had, the reality was clear. He didn't respect me. He didn't care about me. If he had, he would have never lied to my face for so long. The worst part was that he didn't even seem to be remorseful. There was no apology, no regret, just excuses. I felt my heart harden in a way it never had before. I was done with the games, done with pretending that we could go back to the way things were. I had given him every opportunity to come clean, to prove that he was worthy of my trust, and each time he failed. The moment he sent me that final message, claiming that everything was misunderstood, I didn't feel anger anymore. I felt nothing but a cold, detached sense of relief. For the first time, I realized that I had been the one holding on to something that was never meant to last. I walked over to the drawer where I had kept all of his things, the little mementos of our time together. A small box with photos, trinkets, even the engagement ring he had once promised would be our future. It didn't feel like love anymore. It just felt like a chain, holding me back from everything I had been afraid to face. I grabbed it all. His clothes, his shoes, his things, and I packed it into a few boxes. There was no point in dragging it out. The moment I had decided to let go of him, I had also decided to let go of all the memories that were tied to him. I didn't need to keep reminding myself of how he made me feel small, of how his lies had infected every part of my life. When I was done, I grabbed my phone and texted him the message I had known I needed to send for days. We're done. Please don't contact me again. He didn't respond, and for the first time, I didn't care. By the time the dust had settled, I had started to find some semblance of peace. The texts, the calls, the messages, they stopped. For the first time in weeks, my phone was quiet, and with that silence came a calm I hadn't known I'd been missing. It was as though I could breathe for the first time in a long time. But just because the noise stopped didn't mean the battle was over. A few days later, I received an email. It wasn't from him, but from his lawyer. I couldn't help but roll my eyes when I saw it. It was laughable, really. His lawyer demanding that I return the designer gifts I had packed and delivered. The same designer bags, shoes, and accessories that he had bought me over the course of our relationship. Apparently, after everything that had happened, he wanted them back. It wasn't just about the gifts. It was a way to further manipulate me. It was him trying to assert some final ounce of control, even though I had already walked away from him. The email accused me of taking possession of items that were rightfully his. It was as if he was trying to make me feel guilty, as though I had wronged him in some way. I had heard of people trying to get their things back after a breakup, but this was on another level. I had already delivered all of his belongings to his co-worker's apartment, the woman he had been seeing. I had taken the time to ensure everything was packed properly. I had even sent him a picture of the parking lot where I had left his stuff. Yet, here he was, using his lawyer to accuse me of taking what was his. I wasn't going to entertain this any longer. I pulled up the receipts for every single designer item I had bought him. Shoes, bags, clothes. Every single one of them was purchased with my own money, money he had never once acknowledged when it came to the things I bought him. And yet here he was, trying to manipulate me into feeling like I owed him something. I took a deep breath before responding to his lawyer, knowing I wouldn't let this be the final word. I attached the receipts, my proof of purchase, and included photos of the boxes I had delivered. Here is the proof that all of these items were purchased by me. I have returned all of his belongings, and I do not owe him anything further. The gifts were given to him freely during our relationship. I'm not interested in any further legal action. I sent the email, hit block on his lawyer's number, and felt a slight sense of closure. But I knew this wouldn't be the end of it. His pride wouldn't allow him to let things go so easily. Just when I thought the situation was over, I received another message. This time, it was from his mother. "I don't know why you're doing this," she wrote, "but you need to return the gift. You don't need to be so cruel. He didn't deserve this. He's been trying to reach out. He's hurting." Her words stung, but only because they reminded me of the old version of myself, the one who would have tried to fix things, tried to make everyone else feel better, even if it meant ignoring how much I had been hurt. I didn't respond. I knew there was no point in trying to explain myself. She wasn't going to see it my way, and I wasn't interested in debating it anymore. The next day I ran into him. It was at the coffee shop I used to visit regularly. As soon as I saw him, I felt a wave of disgust wash over me. He was standing there, with that same look on his face, the look he always wore when he thought he could get away with things. It had always made me feel like he was entitled to my time, to my love, and to my forgiveness. But not anymore. I tried to walk past him, but he stopped me. "Please," he said, his voice barely audible. "I need you to listen. I'm sorry. I made mistakes, but we can still fix this. I can change. I want to change." I didn't even flinch. The apology meant nothing to me anymore. "You made a choice," I said coldly. "You've made that choice over and over again, and now I'm making mine." He stared at me, his face falling as he realized that I wasn't going to soften. "You can't just throw everything away," he said, his voice rising. "You're going to regret this." "I won't," I said firmly, locking eyes with him. "I'm not going to waste my life on someone who doesn't respect me. You don't get to manipulate me anymore. This is over, and there's nothing you can do to change that." For the first time, I wasn't angry. I was at peace. I wasn't fighting anymore. I wasn't trying to convince him to love me. He stood there, speechless, and I walked past him. As I reached the door, I felt a strange sense of freedom. This was the closure I had been waiting for. It's strange how quickly life can shift, how a single decision can change everything. For months, I had been caught in a cycle of doubt, confusion, and self-blame. I had questioned my worth, blamed myself for his actions, and convinced myself that I wasn't enough. But the moment I walked away, the moment I chose to stop fighting for a love that had already failed, everything became clear. There was no grand gesture, no dramatic confrontation that sealed my decision. It was a quiet realization that I had been holding on to someone who never truly held on to me. He had never given me the respect I deserved, and I was done accepting less. In the weeks that followed, I felt a peace I hadn't experienced in years. I didn't wake up wondering where he was or what he was doing. I didn't feel the weight of his lies or the guilt he had imposed on me. I was free. I learned a valuable lesson during this time. Self-respect is not negotiable. You don't have to beg for someone to value you. You shouldn't have to sacrifice your peace for the sake of someone else's happiness. And the moment you realize that, you'll see how much strength you truly have. I also realized that it wasn't just about him. It was about me, about knowing my worth, my boundaries, and the fact that I deserved a love that was honest, open, and mutual. I had spent so long making excuses for someone else's behavior that I had forgotten what it meant to care for myself first. As time went on, I started to rebuild. I focused on the things that brought me joy, spending time with friends, rediscovering hobbies I'd put aside, and finding peace in my own company. I was no longer defined by the relationship that had ended. I was defined by the strength it took to walk away. He tried to reach out a few more times, but I didn't respond. I had nothing left to say to him. I wasn't interested in rehashing the past or revisiting what was broken. The only thing I cared about was my future, and it was a future I was finally building for myself without the burden of someone else's mistakes. The last time I heard from him, he sent one final message: "I hope one day you'll forgive me." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I had already forgiven myself.